Yes, start.
ॐ सहना भवतु सहना भुनक्तु सह वीर्याकरवावहै मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरि ओम तत्सत्. Today, our topic of discussion is education during Sutra period. First of all, I like to thank this organization, Vivekananda Prabodhini, for giving me this opportunity to celebrate 75th Independence Day of India. My topic is education during Sutra period. In Upanishads, we are told that there are two kinds of knowledge, a higher and lower one. The higher one is that in which the immortal Brahma is realized. The lower one, however, consists of Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, Atharva Veda, phonetics, rituals, grammar, etymology, meters, and astronomy. This is the earliest enumeration of the so-called six Vedangas, that is, the six limbs or auxiliary sciences of the Veda. Initially, it had to be learned. It had to be learned by in Vedic schools in order to understand Vedic texts. But in course of time, these subjects were treated more systematically, and there arose still within the framework of the Vedic schools. Through a presentation, I can elaborate the subject. Emergence of Sutra literature. Before discussion about education, we have to study the literature, how it came into being. In course of time, Vedic studies, especially its limbs, that is Vedangas, were treated more systematically, and special schools of study for every one of the six auxiliary sciences of Veda came into being. Out of these were born independent text of textbooks called sutras. The period of sutra literature was 700 to 300 BC. We should mind it that this period is also connected with the rise of a new school of thought, that is Buddhism, whereby Brahmanism was called upon to meet a novel situation to which it had never been accustomed before. According to Weber, originally this literature originally proceeded purely from theoretical heterodoxy regarding the relation of matter to spirit and similar questions. The early Buddhism was but one out of many sects then existing. Still, the at the same time, the study of Vedas also realized about a thread that a short rule or a theorem condensed into a few words. After the period of Brahmanas, sutras introduce us to a new types and forms of literary activity called forth by the requirements of the times, by new social, religious, and political conditions. We have told already that Buddhism came into being in this period, and that the rise of Sutra literature is connected with the necessities of self defense and self preservation of the old Vedic tradition. The mass of matter became too vast in Vedic literature, and diffuse discussion of details had to be replaced by their concise collective summaries. Sutra literature is that concise collective summaries of Vedic literature, and it was written with a very practical approach. Practical approach means to preserve and to propagate the original Vedic knowledge. Sutra literature came into being. Here is a comment by our Sanskrit rishis. An author, we have told already that this is a concise form of a vast slokas or part of Vedic knowledge. So he commented, an author rejoiced in the economizing of half a short vowel as much as in the birth of a song. He was rejoiced by concising all the vast knowledge into one particular syllable or word. Sutras are more suitable vehicles of knowledge. It represents the quintessence of all the knowledge previously acquired and accumulated by the study and meditation of centuries. It belongs to all. It is the common possession, the property of the whole people. We find in these works a rich treasure of ideas and customs have been left untouched and handed down in their ancient form. This is the actual implication of Sutra literature, that these works are a rich treasure of ideas and customs have been left untouched and handed down in their ancient form. Now, new subjects of studies, new subjects of studies, which are the continuation of Brahmanas. There are four categories: Sauta Sutra, continuation of Brahmanas on their ritual side; Grisha Sutras, treating of numerous ceremonies applicable to the domestic life; Dharma Sutra, based on tradition or Smriti. We can categorize into two parts also: Shruti and Smriti. Srota Sutras from Shruti, that means Vedic studies and ideas, spirituality; and Dharma Sutras and Smarta Sutras from Smriti, based on domestic life, daily life, and practical life and rules, our earliest legal traditions. Silver Sutras, practical manuals of measurements necessary for construction of altars. So, we can name some of our wise rishis, sutrakaras, like Ashtralayana, Bharadwaja, Bodhayana, Vasishtha, Apastambha, etc. for their Srota Sutra and Dharma Sutra. Actually, Dharma Sutras are very important for our Indian culture and traditions. The entire body of the Vedic works, composed in the style of the sutras, is divided into six branches. We have already told Vedangas. There are six branches of Vedangas, namely Shiksha. Shiksha, as defined by Shayana, as the science of the pronunciation of letters, accents, and the like. Some of the headings in the seventh book of Taittiriya Upanishad, seventh book of Taittiriya Upanishad, we can find on letters, on accents, on quantification, on the organs of pronunciation, etc. Originally a part of Brahmana, the subject came to be treated as independent scientific treatise called the Pratishaksha. Each and every Vedanga may be considered as independent scientific treatise in Sutra period. These were intended to record what was peculiar in the pronunciation of different Vedic schools. This is about Shiksha. Very short note. Regarding Chanda, it was scattered in the Brahmanas, but it is the sutras, Sauta Sutra, specially written by Shankhayana, the Rigvedic Pratishaksha. It was considered as Rigvedic Pratishaksha, that an attempt is made to arrange the archaic meters systematically. We know in Vedic studies, meters are very important and regarded as one of the main theme of Vedic studies. Without proper meter, the study is not properly done. Next is Vyakaran or grammar. It was the third subject. The foundation was already laid by in Padapatha, pre-Paninian Yashka's work. Before Panini, Yashka started this study of grammar through Padapatha, and it was considered as an important Vedanga. Next is Nirukta. Nirukta is etymology as represented in the work of Yaska. Here also, Yaska represented etymology as a subject of study. It is a sort of an etymological lexicography of Vedic terms. Yaska had before him five such collections of which the first three contain synonyms, the fourth a list of specially difficult Vedic words, and fifth classification of the various divine personages who figure in the Veda. Kalpa is most important or ceremonial all ceremonial activities are uh, laid in this branch of study. And this Kalpa Sutra, all the sutras like uh, Srota Sutra, etc., are based entirely on are in the in this branch of Vedanga Kalpa. There are different shakhas in course of time.
Madam, sorry, are you showing presentation right now?
No, no, no.
No, no. Okay, no.
I have shown
Sure,
the
no. Okay, thank you, thank you.
categories. Now I am elaborating these
Okay,
categories.
thank you, thank you.
Kalpa is most important of all ceremonial activities. These sutras are based entirely on the Brahmanas, of which they presuppose not only the distinct collections but also different shakhas, which in course of time had branched off from each of them. The sixth Vedanga is Jyotisha. Jyotisha, the astronomy of which literature available very scanty, but Jyotisha actually the astronomy as cultivated in those days, it was considered as one of the limbs of Vedic studies, the sixth Vedanga. These are important because whenever we try to analyze the system of education in that period, the contents are very important because it has got much influence on the content. Now we are coming to the characteristics of education in this period. There are so much points we cannot cover in 1 hour. I tried to uh, limit them into some important points which are very distinctive from Vedic period and from they are very distinctive and which is distinctive also from later period, later than Sutras, after Sutra period. It is very important. The first point is specialization of studies. Specialized studies started from this period. The age of sutras was an age of scientific study and specialization. We have already told that the total knowledge, the total content of Vedic studies were concised through sutra literature. So, at first, the study of these angas was strictly subservient to primary needs of Vedic study, and it meant only the transmission of traditions from the teacher to the people. In course of time, content began to widen out and decreased the independence of special declared the independence of special schools. Thus arose the special sciences and specialists. The sacrificial ritual itself led to the growth of some sciences. Geometry and algebra arose out of elaborate rules for construction of altar. Astronomy and astrology to find out proper time for sacrifice. Grammar and philology to protect sacred texts from any kind of corrupted pronunciation. Different legal school came into being to regulate society. The expansion of learning brought in the system of specialization. So, a systematic development of education was started from this period. Next important characteristics, as I thought, secular component of curriculum. Secular means it is irrespective of any kind of rituals or sacrifices. Some subjects came out. Some of the sutra works furnish evidence showing the growth of a few secular subjects. There is a passage in Apastambha's Dharma Sutra, quote unquote, the knowledge which Sudras and women possess is after the completion of all study as the supplement of Atharva Veda. Here, two things are important. They told Sudras and women possess after completion of all study. All study means they meant that completion of Vedic studies, they supplement some learning which supplement of Atharva Ved, like knowledge of performing arts like dancing, acting, music, etc. Other than this, trading also comes under this point. The object of the sutras is to forbid all those before sacred learning. After sacred learning, the Sudras and women were allowed to learn all these things. According to Prasthana Veda of Madhusudan Saraswati, each Veda has an Upaveda. Arthashastra Upaveda is part of Atharva Veda, or Upaveda of Atharva Veda is Arthashastra according to, as per the analysis of Madhusudan Saraswati. It may also be noted that outside the circle of Brahmanical study, there were thus existing the secular arts and sciences as part of Upaveda. Next, system of education, system of rituals actually, through rituals, system of educations through following some rituals. The system of education in Sutra period developed pre-existing traditions, unwritten laws and customs indicated in the sacred texts, and all these were codified in this period. They ushered the age of social legislation of a rigid system of rules, regulations, and restrictions for the sake of the preservation of the culture they represent. We all know about some rituals like Vidyarambha, Upanayana, the penances and penalties attaching to the violation of the primary obligation of Upanayana only show that what extent education was valued in Sanatan society. Because these Vidyarambha and Upanayana were very important, without which, if anybody violate these rituals or anybody does not perform these rituals properly, they were penalized, because these rituals were the starting point of education. And it is an indication of universal and compulsory education among all the three castes which made up Aryan society in those days. Aryan society here needs some explanations. If I get time, I can explain it. But Aryan society as a whole includes Brahman, Kshatriya, and Vaishya in those days. They also imply, by contrast, the supreme efficacy of Upanayana as a purifying influence, a factor of moral and spiritual uplift. Duration of academic session was 4.5 to 5.5 months. There are various commentaries and various views, but more or less 4.5 to 5.5 months from Sravana full moon. These days, some sects observe Chaturmasya Brata. You know, this Chaturmasya was very significant for academic session, a block of educational session. And also Samavartana, that was very important because there were different types of snatakas, and after the completion of a course they can choose their Garhastha life, or they can choose eternal studentship for entire livelihood, and the Vedic teacher, they became the Vedic teachers. Next comes rules of study. Rules. The method of teaching, the rules or the rules of Vedic study implied by what is technically termed as Anubachana. Anubachana was the term, the style of teaching. The rules are explained in Shankhayana Griha Sutra. In the first place, the text of a hymn of the Rig Veda is taught to the student. Secondly, the rishi, deity, and meter of the hymn are indicated to him. In this way, the teacher is to go on reciting the hymns belonging to each rishi or each anubaka of Veda, which make up the lesson for each day. Shorter lessons were exercised for students of other castes. Shorter lessons, that means the lessons were decided on the basis of the capacity of the learner. It was very flexible, and shorter lessons were exercised for students of other castes who had no intention of becoming Vedic scholar. It was the basic or fundamental requirement of each and every student to be acquainted with Vedic. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, madam. Go ahead.
It is very interesting that each and everybody were to be acquainted with Vedic studies. But everybody will not be a Vedic scholar. It was accepted. So, for those who will not be a Vedic scholars, they were taught the short lessons. Onubaka, for example, Onubaku of 10th Mandala of Rig Veda. And it was decided or considered by the teacher. Here, another interesting thing is 5 limbs of Vedic study as referred by Vachaspati Mishra. These 5 limbs are Adhyayana. Adhyayana, hearing the word. Next, after Adhyayana, that means after hearing, Shabda, that is apprehension of meaning of word that is heard. Third point is Uha. Uha means reasoning, leading to generalization. Next is Shurit Prapti. Shurit Prapti means confirmation by friend or teacher. Next is Dana, that is application. If we consider these 5 steps, that is very modern, even sometimes we can resemble it with our taxonomy of objectives. Whenever we teach in a class, our objectives are like this. First of all, the student has to receive, they has to hear the lesson, then apprehension, that is understanding, they have to understand it, and after that reasoning comes. Just like after an understanding, we will be able to reason. Reason means analysis and synthesis of the fact and or the subject or the content. And fourth stage is Shurit Prapti, that is confirmation by friend, that is sharing with the class. Another interaction process in the classroom, confirmation by the friend or teacher, and then Dana, that is application of that knowledge. That acquired knowledge should be applied, and that is the final stage of learning. This is very scientific, these 5 steps of learning. Next comes qualification and duties of teachers. This is also very interesting. Apastamba Sutra tells us teacher should be a man in whose family sacred learning is hereditary. In whose family sacred learning is hereditary. That means there should be a tradition of teaching. Tradition of teaching. There are different opinions regarding the teachers. For example, there are different types of teachers also. For example, Acharya. Who is an Acharya? Acharya is defined by Manu to be one who initiates a pupil and teaches him the Veda together with the Kalpo, the sutras referring to sacrifice, and Rahasyas, that is, Upanishads and secret portions. Secret portions means the spiritual knowledge. Again, Gautama told us the title Acharya belongs to one who initiates people and teaches him the Veda. Acharya called Oti Guru along with father and mother. And this, there are so many opinions, but one thing is supported by all the rishis, all our sutrakars, that acharyas taught without any fees. They considered their action or activity of teaching as a religious work, as a duty from the student. They did not get any fees. They did not want any fees. Another kind of teachers were there, especially Boshishta refers Upadhyaya, who teaches the part of a Veda or its Anga. Manu and Vishnu accounted them as the teachers who teaches for a fee. That means Upadhyaya, another category of teachers who taught in lieu of fees from the students. There are so many opinions, but one thing that was very strict: a teacher who neglects the instruction of his pupil ceases to be his teacher. The obedience of the pupil was limited by the conduct of the teacher. Old world teachers were, okay, this point I must elaborate. Sometimes in many of our textbooks on ancient Indian education, this period or the account of education, they describe it as undemocratic. In Bengali also there are several books who describes Brahmanic system of education as undemocratic. The people or the student has to obey gurus, whatever may be the guru's conduct. But here it is very clear that a teacher who neglects the instruction of his pupil ceases to be his teacher. The obedience of the pupil was limited by the conduct of the teacher. If anybody noticed any misconduct in the teacher, the student could leave him. According to Gautama, as a rule, the pupil. Another point is regarding punishment, which is also very modern in nature. As a rule, the pupil shall not be punished corporally. He may be corrected with a thin rope or cane. If the teacher strikes him with any other instrument, he is liable to punishment by the king. Some mentioned allowance of beating on the back part of the body, only back part of the body. That means corporal punishment was not supported. Instead, the teachers were punished, but they had the right to correct the people. Next, we, we shall talk about opportunities of women education. The Vedic tradition was continued as regards to women education of women. We all know about Rigvedic women rishis. Some Smriti texts understand by a Brahmavadini, a Kumari who does not marry. Harita. Harita says women are of two classes. They classified women into two groups. One is Brahmavadini, eligible for Upanayana, sacrifice, Vedic studies, and practice of begging within the household. They were called Brahmavadini. And another category called Suddha Badhu. Saddha Badhu. They were eligible for Upanayana. Grihasutra mentioned Vedic mantras being uttered by the wife at ceremonies was compulsory along with her husband. Wives should be educated to be able to take part in sacrifice. So, women education was not very rare. Hemadri says Kumaris or unmarried girls should be taught Vidyaniti Dharmoniti as education of women can bring good to the families, both for her father and her husband. So, women education was there. Next point is centers or institutions of learning. Institutions and regarding this also, Sutra Period deserves a distinction. First, there are four categories. First is teachers' home as school, which was Gurukul system like that. Teacher's home under Acharya or Upadhyaya. Under Acharya or Upadhyaya. Next is Porishad. This was the center of higher education, academy of learned, like our university, academy of learned and religious man. They consisted of 10 peoples from different categories. The Parishad was a distinctive and higher type of institution where Ved, Shruti, Smriti, the sacred law, the practices, that means sacrifices, all were subject to be cultured. The composition or constitution of the Parishad was quite in keeping with gravity of the functions and responsibilities entrusted to it. It was one kind of organization organized by some wise persons. 10 members, we have told already, there are 10 members, 10 peoples would be associated with it according to Gautama. The 4 men out of 10, 4 people who have completely studied the 4 Vedas, 3 people belonging to the 3 orders enumerated first. That means a student, householder, and an ascetic. Student, householders, and ascetic. 3 categories of people should be there. And 3 men who know 3 different institutes of law. So, the administration or the structure of Parishad was very modern and included the people from all walks of life in the then society. Next type was special sutra schools. Special sutra schools were called charanas. They were mainly dharma, they taught mainly dharma sutras and specialized schools. Original and primary Vedic schools, it appeared as the original and primary Vedic schools, but gradually it included all the types of actually charanas developed as the special schools of Vedic studies as well as different shastras like Dharma Shastra and other sutras, shastras, center of special studies, center of special schools. Those were charana. And there are so many points regarding institutions. We cannot end it up in one day. Many interesting points to note that in administration they were very much participatory, and for as in modern organization we support participatory management, they are also a scheme of participation and participatory management through that was conducted through democratic principles also. If we go through it, if we go into the institutional management, it is very interesting. So these are the characteristics of education in this period. Now we can comment some comments, some important comments by our academicians and researchers. This is also very much important in modern days. I think this is the most important principle. Education in ancient India was free from any external control like that of the state or kings. It was king's duty to see that learned pundits can pursue their academic activities without any hindrance, without any hindrance, any hindrance. That means no social, political interference in the system. They enjoyed total autonomy in the field of education. The decision makers of academic activities were the academicians. This is very important. Next point is the legacy of oral system was legacy of oral system continues. This is important because the oral system in Sutra period, there are the science of writing, but they did not take the advantage of writing because the memorizing or cultivation of memory was very important. There is one fundamental aspect, that is complete independence of the external aids. Aids means science of writing or anything given to learning by the art of by the art of teaching. So, by the art of writing, it is not yet definitely known when the art of writing itself was evolved in India. But the point to be noted in this connection is that even when the art of writing was completely prevalent, the indigenous teachers and educationists deliberately omitted to take advantage of it for purposes of instruction. The Vedic system of oral teaching, like everything else to be found in the Vedas, was the first and last word on the subject of pedagogic method. This also protected this type of oral teaching, this tradition of oral teaching protected a vast resource of our literature also. That is a separate topic to be discussed. It was, it was the Vedic learning has to be had the method of Vedic learning was dependent on memory as dependent on memorization. So they found out several mnemonics or helping procedure for memorization, which after uh, after Vedic literature, it also found very beneficial for our language and our symbolic expression. It is very important. Another point to be noted, the oral system was individualistic in nature. We have already told that teachers considered the capacity of the learner, and 1:1 relation was established between teacher and taught. That was very beneficial for moral, spiritual, and character development of the student. That is an important point. The learning process was individualistic in nature. Next important point is that teachers' control was exercised over spread of knowledge undeserved persons were automatically excluded from the system. As the oral legacy of oral teaching was there, so teachers could easily identify the undeserved person whom he can exclude from the system. That means the deserving persons included in the were only included in the system of education. Another point, knowledge ensured against risk. That means the oral tradition, as Max Muller also pointed out, this one, the Rigvedic material was not written at all. So it kept out of the clutch of political vandalism. It could not destroy the content of knowledge. This is also another fruit of oral tradition. The system produced specialists. I have told it already that specialistic studies, specialized studies evolved in this period. And Max Muller commented about this as the Indian education system, it was a compulsory universal education. There is a misconception about ancient education that deliberately it has thrown some people from society. In every time, in every country, in every society, there are some power hankering people who always keep some people deprived of any fruit of the society. That is true for each and every time, each and every society. The ambition to master more than one subject is hardly known to India. This is the comment on specialized studies. Specialization was so common, or specialization was at the peak. So one teacher or one scholar was specialized only one thing, that is his lifelong endeavor. So the ambition to master more than one subject is hardly known to India. They were so engrossed in his specialized subject. They are so research oriented in a particular deep rooted study. So they did not want to master more than one subject. So Max Muller rightly noted the ambition to master more than one subject is hardly known to India. This much for my presentation. And for references, I have referred these two books. At conclusion, we can say the education of Sutra period, the system of education during Sutra period reveals rich cultural legacy of India, which can make us rethink about the present misconceptions about ancient Indian education. Namaskar.
Namaste, and thank you so much, Dr. Sonali ji. It was a wonderful presentation, and you have covered the subject with an exhaustive detailing. Thank you so much once again on behalf of Vikanda Prabodhi.